The day of the hospital discharge should have felt like relief, a step forward, a moment of comfort knowing that recovery would continue at home where everything is familiar. Instead, it felt abrupt, forced, and unsettling. Being told that the hospital stay was ending earlier than expected brought a strange heaviness that no one around seemed to notice. The sterile walls and constant hum of machines had almost become normal, a strange form of security where at least nurses checked in and doctors reassured that healing was being monitored. Leaving that behind so soon felt unsafe, as though the ground beneath was still unsteady, and yet someone was insisting it was time to walk. The body was weak, movements careful and slow, every breath reminding that health was not yet fully restored. Even sitting upright required effort, the kind that left a faint trembling in the muscles, the kind that made silence feel heavier than usual. The discharge papers were handed over quickly, signatures scribbled as though recovery was nothing more than a formality. Instructions were read in a tone so routine that it almost dismissed the reality of fragility. Take these pills, rest well, avoid strain, words that barely touched the surface of what it meant to leave the structure of care behind. The corridor out of the hospital felt endless, each step pulling at reserves that were not there. The automatic doors opened, and the world outside felt too loud, too fast, too indifferent to weakness. Even the sunlight, sharp and bright, seemed almost cruel, pressing down on tired eyes that had grown accustomed to the dim light of recovery rooms. The car ride was quiet, but not peaceful. Every bump on the road sent small waves of discomfort through the body, a reminder that healing had only just begun. The seatbelt pressed uncomfortably across the chest, and shifting for relief only led to more unease. There was a longing for stillness, for a bed that didn't move, for an environment where the effort of keeping steady wasn't demanded with every passing second. Each glance out the window revealed a world that seemed to carry on unaffected, people rushing to work, children laughing on sidewalks, strangers lost in their own errands. There was a disconnect, a sharp realization that while recovery slowed everything down, the outside world never paused. Arriving home should have been reassuring, but instead it felt hollow. The front door, once a symbol of safety and belonging, now opened to emptiness. The air inside felt stagnant, carrying none of the warmth that was expected after such a vulnerable transition. The living room looked the same as it had before the hospital stay, yet there was something foreign about it now, as though it no longer matched the fragile state of the body walking through it. The walls seemed too wide, the silence too deep, the furniture too distant. Every step through the house felt exaggerated, every sound amplified by the lack of presence around. Moving through the space revealed small challenges that once went unnoticed. The stairs suddenly appeared taller, the hallway longer, the kitchen counter higher. Even the act of lowering into a chair became an ordeal, a careful negotiation between gravity and pain. The body wanted to rest, but the mind wrestled with the unease of being left too soon without proper support. The clock ticked steadily in the background, a reminder of hours that stretched out slowly and heavily. Time no longer felt ordinary. It felt like a weight, something to endure rather than live through. The bag of medications rested on the table, their labels sharp and clinical, each one carrying the silent expectation that they would somehow hold everything together. But without the routine of nurses checking in, the act of managing them felt daunting. A missed dose or a late one could mean more pain, more weakness, more uncertainty. Instructions replayed in memory, but each word seemed fragile, like it could be easily lost in the haze of exhaustion. Even simple acts like reaching for water, opening a pill bottle, or setting an alarm felt heavier than they should. The house, filled with the echoes of past laughter and noise, seemed unfamiliar in this new state of frailty. Recovery at home had been painted as comfort, but in reality it was a test of endurance without the safety net of constant care. The bed that once felt like a place of rest now felt like an isolated island. The windows let in light but not warmth. The body rested there, yet the mind wandered back to the hospital where at least the weakness had been acknowledged, where fragility was seen and cared for. At home, it felt hidden, invisible, as if weakness had no place in the walls where normal life once thrived. The early discharge was not just about leaving a hospital room, it was about being pushed back into a world unprepared to accommodate fragility. It was about being asked to carry the weight of recovery too soon, to balance on legs that were not steady, to breathe through lungs that still felt shallow, to survive in silence when care had been cut short. The transition was meant to be healing, but instead it felt like abandonment dressed in routine, like being cast out of a space of safety into one of uncertainty where every movement, every breath, every hour was a reminder of just how unready everything truly was. The announcement of the family's vacation plans came with a strange mix of excitement in their voices and confusion in the silence that followed. Suitcases began to appear near the hallway, neatly stacked, bright tags swinging from their handles, and the sound of zippers closing echoed like finality. The conversations around the house shifted from concern over recovery to debates about which clothes to pack, which flights to catch, and which beaches they would visit first. The fragile state of the body sitting quietly in the corner of the room seemed to fade into the background as laughter and chatter revolved around itineraries, meals, and excursions. The early discharge from the hospital had not even settled in, the body still trembling with weakness, yet the energy in the house was consumed by the glow of a vacation that promised joy only for those who were leaving. It wasn't just a trip, it was luxury, indulgence, a deliberate escape from the ordinary. Brochures were spread out on the dining table, glossy images of turquoise waters, sun-drenched villas, and sparkling glasses of champagne. Their voices rose with eagerness as they pointed at pictures, as if those beaches were already beneath their feet, as if the promise of paradise outweighed the duty of care. Their faces lit up with anticipation, and it became clear that the excitement of leaving had eclipsed any thought of what staying behind would feel like. It was not just a vacation, it was a symbol of choices, of priorities revealed in plain sight. The timing could not have been worse, yet to them it seemed perfect. With the hospital discharge declared successful on paper, they saw no reason to postpone. The doctor's signatures became their justification, a convenient excuse to convince themselves that leaving was harmless. Their words carried rehearsed assurance, "You'll be fine, it's just rest now, you only need a few days to recover." The more they repeated it, the more it sounded like a script, as though they were trying to convince themselves more than the one who would be left behind. Behind those reassurances lingered the truth they did not speak: the vacation mattered more. There was no space to argue, no room to protest without sounding ungrateful or dramatic. Every attempt to speak up was overshadowed by the swell of their enthusiasm. They spoke of sunsets and spa treatments, of private tours and fine dining, of the rare chance to escape routine life. Their words filled the air until silence became the only response, until the quiet presence of weakness was drowned in the loudness of their excitement. The act of packing was not just preparation for travel, it was a performance of detachment, a declaration that the one left behind was no longer the center of their concern. The house transformed into a staging ground for departure. Clothes piled neatly, toiletries zipped away, passports checked and rechecked. The energy that might have gone into preparing meals, setting up comfort, or ensuring proper care was redirected into ensuring they would not forget sunscreen or chargers. The fridge was cleared of perishable items, but not restocked with anything helpful for someone who could barely stand for long. The checklist pinned to the fridge held reminders of flights, hotel bookings, and dinner reservations, but none about medication schedules or support for recovery. Each detail of their trip was carefully arranged, while the details of what was being left behind were dismissed as unnecessary. The anticipation of luxury was almost intoxicating for them. They spoke of lying on beaches with golden sands, sipping drinks by pools under foreign skies, escaping all responsibility for a while. Their eyes glowed at the thought of it, their voices rising with eagerness. The image of paradise seemed so vivid in their minds that the reality of the fragile figure in the house blurred, became something less pressing, less real. The vacation wasn't just about pleasure, it became a symbol of freedom from obligations they didn't want to carry. Every conversation, every movement toward departure made the walls of the house feel heavier. The silence between their laughter grew louder, pressing into the space like an invisible weight. Watching them prepare was like watching a train pull away in slow motion, knowing it would not stop, knowing there was no seat reserved for the one being left behind. It was not simply about being forgotten, it was about being deliberately excluded, as though fragility was inconvenient in the picture-perfect world they were about to enter. Their smiles, their energy, their careless reassurances painted a clear picture. The vacation had become more than a trip, it had become a choice. And in that choice, luxury won. The moment the door closed behind them, a silence filled the house that was louder than any noise. The kind of silence that pressed against the ears, heavy and suffocating, making every heartbeat echo as if it were being announced to an empty room. Betrayal did not come suddenly. It arrived slowly, creeping in with each memory of their laughter while packing, each image of them checking their passports and smiling as though nothing in the world was more important than the vacation waiting ahead. Left behind in that quiet space, the realization grew sharp. The people trusted most to provide comfort in a fragile state had chosen escape instead. Their absence was not just physical, it was emotional, cutting deep in ways that were difficult to put into words. The betrayal carried layers. It was in the way promises of care were brushed aside as though they were exaggerations, in the way concern had been spoken casually but not acted upon. Before leaving, they had said all the right words: rest well, you'll be fine, it's just a matter of days, but those words felt empty when the rooms fell silent and no footsteps echoed in the hallways. Those reassurances, once meant to soothe, transformed into reminders of how little weight they carried compared to the thrill of luxury that awaited them. Trust fractured with each passing hour, the trust that family would never leave during a time of vulnerability. Abandonment is not only the absence of presence, but the absence of care. It revealed itself in the details that were overlooked, in the way meals had not been prepared, in the way medicines were left in a bag on the counter without organization, in the way not a single phone call was arranged to check in with neighbors or friends. These small omissions were louder than words, speaking clearly about where priorities lay. It was not that they had forgotten, it was that they had chosen not to see. The feeling of betrayal dug in deeper when it became obvious that they understood the fragility of the situation, but decided comfort and indulgence elsewhere mattered more. The mind replayed the days in the hospital, moments when family members sat in chairs beside the bed, their voices soft, their hands gently placed on the arm as though presence alone could heal. Those memories contrasted sharply with the reality of empty rooms, making the abandonment feel even sharper. What had been gestures of love in sterile hallways suddenly looked like performance, duty carried out until freedom arrived in the form of a boarding pass. The betrayal was not only in leaving but in the realization that the care once given might not have been as deep as it seemed, that perhaps it had always been temporary, conditional, fragile. Betrayal carries with it an isolation that seeps into every corner of the mind. The house, once alive with shared voices and daily rhythms, now stood as a reminder of absence. Every object seemed to highlight what was missing, the family photos on the wall smiling brightly at destinations once shared, the empty chairs around the table, the faint scent of perfume left behind on clothes hastily packed. Each item was a silent witness to the choice that had been made, a choice to step away and leave someone behind when they were least able to stand on their own. Trust is something often assumed within families, a bond that feels unbreakable because it is rooted in blood, history, and familiarity. To feel it crack in a moment of vulnerability is to face not only the loneliness of being left, but also the shattering of something once believed unshakable. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was physical. It manifested in the struggle to sit upright without help, in the effort to prepare even the simplest meal without someone nearby, in the long nights where pain pressed against the body without a voice to offer comfort. It was in these moments that the weight of being abandoned truly settled in, heavier than any silence could hold. The mind searched for reasons, tried to piece together justifications that might soften the sting. Perhaps they thought recovery was easier than it was, perhaps they believed strength would come faster, perhaps they convinced themselves absence would not matter as long as there were pills on the counter and a bed to lie on. Yet deep inside, those explanations could not erase the truth that choices had been made, and those choices revealed where love ended and selfishness began. The betrayal was not accidental, it was deliberate, painted over with reassurances and hidden beneath the excitement of escape. The loneliness that followed did not only highlight the absence of family, but magnified the fragility of trust. It left questions without answers, doubts that would linger long after the vacation ended. To feel betrayed in such a vulnerable state was to realize that even the closest bonds could shift, that even those counted on most could turn away when responsibility became inconvenient. It was a truth too heavy to ignore, a truth that filled the air with a weight thicker than silence itself. The first attempt to stand alone after being left behind revealed how fragile the body truly was. Muscles trembled under the weight they once carried with ease, and each movement became a negotiation between determination and pain. The simple act of shifting from the bed to the floor brought a rush of dizziness, as if the room itself tilted, and balance became something distant, almost unreachable. Hands gripped the edge of furniture not for comfort, but for survival, the surface cold and unyielding against weak fingers. Breathing felt heavier than it should, each inhale shallow and strained, each exhale carrying the weight of effort. What once were ordinary routines, walking to the kitchen, reaching for a glass, bending to pick something up, became challenges that demanded strength that was not there. The body resisted with sharp reminders of its fragility. Pain stretched across the chest with sudden intensity, leaving a dull ache that lingered long after. Legs that once moved without thought now felt like burdens, each step slow and unsteady, threatening to give out at any moment. The effort to maintain balance drained more energy than anticipated, and exhaustion set in quickly, pulling at the shoulders, weighing down the eyelids, forcing pauses that felt endless. Even lifting a glass of water felt monumental, the tremor in the hands threatening to spill it before it reached its destination. Every corner of the house became an obstacle course. The hallway, once walked through casually, stretched endlessly, and reaching the end felt like a small victory. The kitchen counter, normally at a comfortable height, now seemed elevated, every movement toward its straining muscles that hadn't yet regained strength. Stairs loomed like a mountain, their presence a reminder that certain spaces in the house were no longer accessible without risk. Even the bathroom carried its own dangers, the slippery floor, the need to bend or stretch, the demand for stability where there was none. The home that should have offered comfort revealed itself as a space filled with quiet dangers, each one magnified by weakness. The body's struggle extended beyond movement. The act of eating became more effort than nourishment. Preparing food required standing longer than strength allowed, reaching for utensils that felt heavier than they should, opening jars that refused to yield to trembling hands. Meals shrank into whatever was simplest to manage, often unsatisfying, often inadequate. The taste of food no longer mattered, it was survival that dictated choices. The lack of appetite from exhaustion only deepened the weakness, a cycle that pressed harder with each passing day. Sleep, once an escape, offered little relief. The body shifted restlessly, unable to find a position that eased discomfort. The silence of the night magnified every ache, every shallow breath, every echo of loneliness in the walls. Pain pulsed faintly beneath the skin, a constant reminder that rest was not healing, but merely another stretch of endurance. Each attempt to drift into sleep was broken by the awareness of fragility, the fear that weakness left unguarded might turn into something worse. The body cried for rest, yet the mind stayed alert, uneasy in its solitude. The physical struggle carried emotional weight that could not be ignored. Each failed attempt to perform what once was effortless carved deeper into the spirit, a reminder of vulnerability that stung sharper than pain itself. Standing too long brought trembling knees, sitting too quickly brought dizziness, and lying down too long left muscles stiff and uncooperative. There was no comfortable place, no state of ease, only shifting degrees of discomfort. The body had become an unpredictable companion, one that could not be trusted fully, one that demanded caution at every turn. Time stretched differently in this state. Hours dragged under the weight of effort, each moment filled with the awareness of weakness. The ticking of the clock sounded louder in the stillness, each second pulling slower than the last. Even daylight felt exhausting, pressing into tired eyes, while night carried a heavy quiet that magnified the struggle. The body's fragility transformed the perception of time, turning days into endless cycles of managing pain, measuring effort, and negotiating with exhaustion. The physical struggle was not simply about weakness, it was about survival in an environment suddenly hostile to fragility. The body demanded patience that felt impossible to give, required strength that had not yet returned, and tested endurance in ways unseen before. Every action, no matter how small, became a reminder of how easily independence could be stripped away. What once required no thought now demanded every ounce of focus, every drop of energy, and still left the body trembling, unsteady, and searching for strength that refused to arrive. The weight of being left behind was not only carried by the body, but pressed heavily on the mind. Loneliness seeped into every corner of thought, filling spaces once warmed by conversation and presence. The emptiness of the house became a reflection of the emptiness inside, amplifying the sense of being abandoned when care was most needed. Silence was no longer just an absence of noise. It became a constant reminder that the voices of family had chosen joy elsewhere while weakness lingered here. This silence did not soothe, it gnawed at the mind, each passing hour stretching longer than the one before. The emotional toll deepened with every attempt to rationalize what had happened. Thoughts circled endlessly, searching for reasons that might explain why luxury was chosen over loyalty. The mind questioned whether love was as deep as once believed, whether concern shown in the hospital had only been temporary, whether promises of care had always been empty beneath the surface. Each question led to another, a spiral that pulled darker with every turn. It was not just the absence of family that hurt, it was the sudden uncertainty about what family truly meant. Memories that once brought comfort now turned into sharp reminders of contrast. The laughter around dinner tables, the warmth of shared celebrations, the safety felt in their presence, all of it replayed like distant echoes that no longer matched reality. Those same people who once created moments of belonging had now created a moment of isolation. The emotional pain lay not just in the fact of being alone, but in the betrayal of expectation, the collapse of a foundation believed to be unshakable. Trust, once steady, now cracked and fragile, leaving behind a constant unease. Loneliness began to shape the rhythms of daily life. Waking up in an empty house carried with it a heaviness that set the tone for the day. There was no cheerful greeting, no sound of footsteps moving through the hallway, no simple question of how the night had been. Each morning began with silence that clung to the walls, and each night ended the same way, the emptiness unbroken by voices that once filled the air. Meals were eaten without conversation, not because words were unnecessary, but because there was no one to hear them. Even small achievements, like managing to prepare food or walk across a room without falling, carried no acknowledgement, no encouragement, only the hollow echo of effort met by silence. The emotional toll was not just sadness, but also fear. Vulnerability magnified every sound in the house, every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling a window. The absence of others made the nights longer, darker, filled with the quiet anxiety that something could go wrong and no one would be there to notice. The body was already fragile, and the mind knew it. That knowledge created a constant tension, an invisible weight pressing down, making rest nearly impossible. Fear grew not only from what had happened, but from what might happen next, and that uncertainty lingered in every corner of thought. Resentment began to weave its way into the emotions, mingling with loneliness and fear. The images of family enjoying beaches, fine meals, and laughter under foreign skies sharpened the contrast of the situation. Their joy became a shadow cast across the silence of the house, each imagined moment of their happiness highlighting the depth of abandonment felt here. The mind could not stop picturing them smiling, carefree, while the struggle for strength continued in solitude. That image burned, not only as a sign of betrayal, but as proof of how easily they had moved on without looking back. Even attempts at distraction failed. Books sat unopened, television offered no comfort, music felt out of place in the heavy silence. Nothing seemed to break the weight of being alone. The mind wandered back again and again to the same thoughts, the same questions, the same ache of wondering why care was replaced so quickly by convenience. It became impossible to escape the loop of thought, the repeated realization that the people trusted most had chosen absence when presence mattered more than anything. The emotional toll reached deeper than sadness. It reshaped identity. To be left behind was to feel less significant, less valued, as though worth could be measured against the cost of luxury. The mind began to question not just the family's choices, but its own place within them. Doubt settled in like a shadow that refused to move, whispering that love might never have been what it seemed, that care was conditional, that belonging could be erased the moment it became inconvenient. This realization stung sharper than loneliness itself, leaving a wound that no amount of silence could cover. The longer the silence lingered, the clearer it became that what happened was not just about being alone, but about uncovering where true priorities had always been. Family was expected to be the safety net, the place where care came before convenience, where love outweighed indulgence. Yet the choice they made revealed something different. Their excitement for luxury had been greater than their willingness to stay, their desire for comfort stronger than their sense of responsibility. That realization cut deeper than any physical weakness could. It was no longer about illness or recovery. It became about trust, about value, about finally seeing the hierarchy of importance that had been hidden beneath words of reassurance and gestures of care. The realization grew heavier with every reminder of their absence. The untouched medications on the counter, the empty chairs around the dining table, the sound of silence at night, all of it whispered the same truth. They had not just left, they had decided that leaving was acceptable, even preferable. In their eyes, recovery had been reduced to something simple, something manageable alone, something that did not require their presence. Their priority was not the fragile state of the one left behind, but the thrill of stepping into another world where responsibilities dissolved. That choice illuminated where love ended and where self-interest began. Memories replayed differently after that truth set in. Words once spoken with comfort now carried a sharper edge. The gentle promises of "we're here for you" felt hollow, echoes of a role they played until something better came along. Every gesture of kindness in the hospital now seemed like obligation, performed only because absence would have been too obvious. The realization that those moments might not have been genuine, but conditional was heavier than any loneliness. It meant that love had boundaries, and those boundaries had already been crossed when the chance for pleasure appeared. The mind shifted from sadness to clarity. It was no longer only about what had been lost, but about what had been revealed. When people show who they are in moments of choice, those moments hold more truth than years of words. Their decision to pack bags and board a plane instead of offering support revealed what mattered most to them. The shimmering waters of distant beaches outweighed the quiet struggle of recovery. Fine meals, hotel rooms, and laughter beneath the sun took precedence over the weak breath and trembling hands left at home. The truth was undeniable. Priorities had been exposed, and care had never truly been first. The body's fragility was matched only by the fragility of trust. What had once been strong now felt uncertain, every bond weakened by the weight of choices made. Sitting in the silence of the house, it became clear that dependency was misplaced, that expectations of unconditional love might have been illusions. The realization was painful, but it also forced a new perspective. If love could be abandoned so easily, then it had never been as deep as once believed. Family had chosen to show where their hearts were, and their hearts were not in the fragile home they left behind. Each day that passed without a phone call or message pressed the truth deeper. Their absence was not an accident, but a reflection of priorities. They were not consumed with worry about whether meals were eaten, whether medication was taken, or whether loneliness was overwhelming. Their minds were occupied by itineraries, meals, and adventures, by moments that belonged only to them, free from responsibility. That freedom had been purchased with betrayal, and it exposed a reality that could no longer be ignored. Even the house itself seemed to echo this realization. The photographs on the wall showed smiling faces at past vacations, moments of joy when everyone was together. Yet looking at them now revealed another truth. Perhaps joy had always been about shared comfort, not shared responsibility. Perhaps those smiles had never been about unity, but about convenience, about the ease of enjoying good times without being tested by hard ones. The photographs that once felt warm now carried an undercurrent of distance, proof that the image of family could hide the reality of priorities. The realization reshaped everything. It was no longer possible to see family the same way, no longer possible to believe promises without doubt, no longer possible to trust that care would come before self-interest. Every action going forward would be measured against this truth, every word weighed against the memory of silence. Priorities had been revealed in a way that could never be undone, and the understanding of where love stood would remain long after the echoes of their absence faded from the rooms.